Component 1 on the surface looks like the most interactive you can be with your learners and how they can produce something really telling and imaginative. If you've watched some of the other videos, then you'll have seen how you could do this with a game and other elements. However, the really key things about how you work with project management and planning a project and the tasks involved. There are some things you can do to engage your learners with project planning, and one of these is to maybe make them keep a diary. Okay, diary might go down badly, so think of it like a Big Brother diary room. Rather than have them write a diary, they could sit in the room every week and talk through what they've done. Doing this as part of the assessment would allow them to meet C2, D3 easier, as they will be much better to go back over the decisions and the things they've made and recorded in the diary room in order to justify how they refined and developed an effective user interface and talk very clearly about the strengths and weaknesses of the project plan in terms of how it came off. Looking at the overall component, if we start with Learning Aim A, when it comes to investigating user interface designs for individuals and organizations, there are plenty of ways you can do this now. This is because learners have to explain two different types of user interface and how they meet design principles for A2 P1, or analyze or assess when looking at merit or distinction for level 2. You can approach this by giving them lots of interfaces to play with. This can be anything from Google Home, Siri, Alexa, to mobile phones, websites, McDonald's, ordering online through Wix, or through Amazon, or even looking at how they interact with a DOS-based interface. I'm sure your IT managers will happily come and explain how DOS works and how in the early days of computing this was the only way to interact with your PC. You could also get a travel agent in, for example, if they can come and explain how airline services work because they still work on a command line text-based interface. However, if you don't have access to this and the students are using a Windows machine, they could use a Unix emulator like the one on Tutorials Point to make directories, move directories, or even try the VI editor. Still on Learning Aim A, for Censor interface types, you could always rig up something like the Crystal Maze as a game or an escape room, whereby the learners have to see how sensors in a system or room can feed input and do such things as turn lights on or off or control smartboards. If your school is automatically rigged this way, then you could have them wander around classrooms. I appreciate your estate managers may not like it that you're turning lights on and off in rooms, but it will show them how sensor-driven interfaces really work. For Learning Aim B, we're looking at project planning. Inside this, one of the nice things is to bring up how and why we manage projects and how we do it in everyday life. Ask them to think about when they're going out with their friends next and how do they arrange to go out. Do they set each other timescales? Do they set timeframes? Do they set constraints over who's going out and when? And do they look at potential risks, like what happens if they both wear the same outfit, or what happens if we run into this certain person we don't want to see? We know we do this in everyday life. However, sometimes we forget that this is an actual part of project planning. This can really make it relatable. For example, a classroom task could be getting them to project plan their next night out, their next trip, their next gaming session online, and how will they put this into practice? When they come to apply this to an industry, it makes a lot more sense to them this way. There's a lot to be said for letting learners play. Yes, I know in the AAB the task is focused on using PowerPoint, but if your learners are more used to something else, for example Game Maker or Construct or Unity, or even if you have some really savvy learners, then it's possible to help them build inside these programs. Something to be aware of when refining a user interface for Learning Aim C is that if you do this as a classroom task, you can set it up to let them test and break each other's interfaces as well as giving feedback. In order to meet C1 M5 and above into level 2 answers, you could use GitHub to document the changes. This is because GitHub allows them to automatically fork their project, which means they can fork as they develop new iterations, and these can be referenced in the design document to show how changes are made.